Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. Continuing on with my CitizenCon coverage, today I will be breaking down the Power Play panel. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Thank you so much for the support, and if you do enjoy my videos, please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. So with CitizenCon now done and dusted, we have many cool panels highlighting much of the work that is currently underway for Star Citizen's Persistent Universe and Squadron 42. Now I have recently covered the panel Talking Ship, which delves into the new Greycat STV, UTV, and the Crusader Spirit series, which I will link below, but today I will be breaking down the Power Play panel, which talks all about the resource management gameplay, like life support, gravity, and engineering, utilizing all of the many components on board your ship. Now, resource management is an underlying system that allows items to produce, consume, and store resources, which, as the developer puts it, is the in-game representation of real-life cables, pipes, fuel tanks, batteries, engines, and so on. So basically, your power plant provides power to other items like your coolers, in which the coolers will then help to reduce the heat of other components and so on and so forth, like lifting the bonnet or the hood of a car and fiddling away with the engine. Now, it won't just apply to ships, it applies to anything in the verse that requires resources, like space stations and planetary hubs and homes, underground facilities like we also saw at CitizenCon, outposts, and even landing zones like Hurston and Microtech. So it's basically integral to the functionality of the entire universe. Now, they did say that they will start with smaller vehicles to begin fleshing this system out and then move on to bigger ships and eventually capital ships. We have heard and seen them working on the Hammerhead, but for example, take your Dragonfly or even your STV, being able to affect its performance by swapping out the various components, or if you're in an Aurora, managing the ship systems on board from the pilot seat just to give the optimal performance. Then imagine stepping that up to larger ships and vehicles, having a dedicated member on board or several members of the crew running around, ensuring the ship is running at its best. Then apply that to a homestead that you have just built. Perhaps you could find a better component out on your travels, bring it home and swap it out. So this system won't only apply to the dedicated engineer on board Multicrew ships, it will apply to everybody in varying scales. Now, one of the other major aspects that will change with this full resource management system is that ships and vehicles will no longer be time to kill, and they will finally move to a time to disable, having systems shutting down or failing while you are in combat, or just generally flying around and having to fix them up, swap them out, or call in help, which will also encourage players to disable other ships for bounty hunters to capture their target alive, or pirates to steal cargo. Now, CIG also mentioned that missions like Siege of Orison will increase in scope as players will be able to cripple resources or change the way that resources are distributed, like cutting power, cutting fuel, or other critical parts to further progress. So it's a great system that really opens up the potential for open-ended gameplay, allowing us to have multiple options and approaches for all of our objectives, just providing a hell of a lot more choice on how you want to go about dealing with the objective. Now, they do go on to say that this will open up the possibility for player-owned structures, outposts, or stations in space where players will need to manage resources, bring in fuel, and do repairs, which is very exciting to hear. Now, once this system begins fleshing out, CIG envision players taking on roles in multi-crew ships like engineers, mechanics, and tactical officers, with the engineer trying to maintain all the resources flowing through the ship and all the items functioning properly. The mechanics will be running around the ship, changing fuses, repairing things that have broken down, while the tactical officers might be moving shields from one side of the ship to another just to counter any threats. Of course, the pilot will be then flying the ship, and the turret gunners will be taking on any incoming fighters. So it's going to be quite a moment when proper multi-crew becomes a reality, having everybody on board actually doing something, and as you're moving, you might be running around trying to find an unused relay, while you're seeing other people picking out components and fixing them and swapping them out. Now, he did mention that for all of us who are waiting for capital ships like the Idris and the Javelin, this system is what will make using those ships possible. So they broke down the resource management into several key elements. We have power energy resources, life support, item maintenance, relay handling, access control, and gravity. So starting with power, energy, and resources, this is where the player will be able to overload items to get more efficiency out of them at the risk of burning them out, or you could underload these items, which will save on resources if the full load is not needed. We will need to be paying attention to the balance of resources like power, fuel, coolant, heat, and so on in order to maintain a balanced ship, which means prioritizing certain items and their resource consumption. So a lot of this will likely be using MFDs at a station to monitor these values, allowing you to tweak the balance while being able to check the health of any items and systems. For life support, this is one of, if not the most important system on board your ship, as atmosphere is finite in all of these spaces inside the ship, so you'll be ensuring the consumables inside the life support generator are maintained and always present so it can generate a breathable atmosphere or the appropriate temperatures. Not entirely sure how many or what the consumables inside the life support generator will be. I would assume oxygen tanks would be one. But as it was mentioned in the past, certain cargo types may need specific conditions as to not ruin their contents or become volatile. So keeping the cargo bay at an appropriate temperature for that cargo could be very important. For the item maintenance side of things, players will be able to control all items throughout the ship, turning them on and off, swapping out broken items, replacing them with working components. You can also control what sub-items are found inside each component, as many will be able to hold 1, 2, maybe even 3 sub-components, each altering the strengths and weaknesses of the main component. Plus, you will need to replace broken fuses when the item takes too much damage. Talking of which, relay handling is the management of defining the resource distribution throughout the ship, so using, in essence, circuits to be as effective as possible for all situations. So for example, if you want all power all of the time, then the resources will be spread throughout the ship equally. If you want to be stealthing around, you might want to only have a few systems on, or if a component gets damaged, there is no need to keep sending resources to that dead component, so you can reroute the power to be used elsewhere. Next up, we have access control, which will enable ship roles, where the captain can assign certain roles to crewmates, like the engineer, for example, may only have access to certain controls relating to engineering, whereas the pilot may not have that access, or a turret gunner may only have access to a specific turret or all turrets. So great when you have crew members of varying ranks, eliminating the threat of espionage, which I can assure you will happen, and from what I've heard, already is between certain orgs. And the final element is gravity, which, as you can imagine, is the component that produces the artificial gravity on board your ship and providing more control over this component. So turning off gravity might be a good way to reserve resources, access certain areas of the ship, or even help to repel or slow down boarders. So I suppose the big question is, where are they currently with this system? And right now they have it in engine, they have working prototypes of power, gravity, life support, and the relay network. The power systems allow them to over and underpower items, set priorities for item producers and consumers, and set the path of resources throughout the ship via the resource relay network. This now means they can distribute the base energy and fuel throughout the ship, and as the demonstration shows here, the missing fuse has cut the relay network in half, so if he gets one from this other area of the ship, the power goes from this section, being a smaller, less important section of the ship, and once that fuse is then placed into the new section, it re-establishes the larger portion of the ship, which in essence reconnects the top half to the bottom half of the ship again. So right now with the life support system, they can remove oxygen from a room by opening the door and having it vent out, as we can see here with the yellow and black dots representing the presence or lack of oxygen, while the display shows the actual atmosphere of that location. They show that they can turn off the atmosphere to a room using the control button and then re-establish that atmosphere. It's also able to put out fires by depriving it of oxygen, again via venting control panels or just waiting for the fire to use up all of the oxygen inside the room. They can adjust the temperature in each room as well, which as you can see here will affect the player's status, just like it does when you're on a planet, and they can also adjust the slider to determine how severely the automated ship systems needs to work to re-achieve the desired temperature. Plus, fires on board ships will automatically affect the ambient temperature, so all very impressive stuff. It also allows for increased oxygen usage when there are more players in a room than the ship systems can cater for, which is where the optimal crew count for each ship comes in, plus venting or filling rooms with atmosphere. And then here we can see them adjusting the level of gravity, turning it to low gravity, allowing you to jump higher for longer, or even just toggling it on and off. Now it also allows for a new level of sabotage, like we see here, so removing the relays to drop the shields on a specific side. So to finish with, they did say that they don't want to rush this system out, and they want to get it right from the beginning. So don't expect all components and systems in for the initial release, but what they are aiming for the initial release is interactable and accessible items on ships, so removing and replacing components, the relay gameplay, changing fuses on the relays, resource balancing, defining control groups that will be accessible through MFDs or your multifunction displays, allowing people to create presets for your resource network, which will be very handy, going from low power mode to full power to stealth to combat, an engineering UI with at least a list or schematic view of your ship, which we saw a potential schematic idea of a 3D hologram here, external engineering screens, and allowing engineers to define the tuning parameters that can be accessed by the pilot at the press of a button. And after the initial release, they say the rest will fall in place in subsequent patches. So that was the panel talking about the resource network system. For me, this is one of the biggest and most impressive pieces of gameplay that I've been waiting for. It is a huge system, bigger than I thought, in fact, and I can just imagine, even outside of playing the role of an engineer or mechanic, you could be wandering through a derelict ship, removing all of these components, subcomponents, relays, taking them to sell, to trade, or even just using your own ship or hab. It looks like all of the tools are now in place to allow meaningful multi-crew gameplay, and once this begins rolling out, having multiple people on board of a ship will be far more interesting. Even just travelling long distances alone in your own ship will be more interesting, as you can monitor components and life support, maybe using that time to replace a few components that have degraded somewhat, or get things set up for the location you're heading to. Now this is going to be a great system to come in, and I can't wait to learn more as it continues to develop. But with that said, that is the end of this video. As I say, I will be covering all of the other CitizenCon panels, so if you do enjoy my videos, please do consider subscribing. Also, come and hang out over at twitch.tv/supermacbrother. You are all more than welcome over there. Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind, does the channel a big favour, and tick that notification bell if you would like to be notified when my videos go live. Again, big thank you to my patrons and channel members. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.